Hey there. Hello. How do you do? My name is Harry Wetzel. Thanks for coming. It's the 80s, darling. Yes, it is. It's the 80s all over again. Yes. This is a special bonus episode that you may have already watched. X marks the spot. Yes, we were able to add some bonus content for you in an episode which you may have already seen. I hope you enjoy it again. I know you will now that we've got this extra stuff to look at. All right, here we go. Oh. Hey there. Hello, how do you do? My name is Harry Wetzel. Thanks for coming. It's the 80s, darling. It is. 1985, February, Friday, 2.5 hours after Gregory left the building carrying a huge envelope bulging with $50 bills and $20 bills. He took it to make a bank deposit. Last thing he said was, "I'll be right back." It's 2.5 hours later, and he's not back. I am in the act and process of realizing that I may have made a dreadful mistake. And oh, so clever of Gregory to actually shove the envelope of money into my pants pocket so that when the time came, he asked for it, for me to give it to him. And so I was the one who ultimately actually gave the envelope filled with cash to the man that took it. Very clever. So it's a slow day at Vino Veritas. Customers are few and far between, and Donald and I are just hanging around, waiting for the sword of Damocles to fall in the form of Steve the Boss showing up. Yes. Another song comes on the radio. It's Say It Isn't So by Hall & Oates. Please say it isn't. And then eventually, Stephen comes in. And Michael. Michael had apparently picked him up in Margie's station wagon, and the two of them had been driving around town taking care of errands. And then they showed up at the booze store. Well, when Steve got there, I went up to him, and I quickly and succinctly as I could explained to him that Gregory came in. He bossed us around. He took an envelope of money to the bank for a bank deposit. That was 2.5 hours ago, and he's not back yet. Stephen bolted for the back office. Donald and Michael and I just made scared faces at each other, and Michael eventually shrugged and started to amble his way towards the office, and then Steve came charging out. He sprinted up to me and Donald. He says, "How long was he here? What did he say? When did he get here?" And so we explained as best as we could the entire story from beginning to end, as best as we could understand it, because it all happened so quickly. And we corroborated each other's story, and so that was the last thing we heard from Gregory was, "I'll be right back." Well, Steve has worked himself up into a froth of a rage. He's stamping around the store, and he's barking and yelling, "I want him! I want him!" And Michael comes up. He says, "Well, I got my cousins. They could, well, you know, what do you want to do?" Steve says, "I want him! He took around $900. I want him!" Michael said, "Well, my cousins, they could, well, what do you want to do? You want him to break his legs? They could do that." Stephen bolted out of the front door. Michael gave us a look. Stephen's out front, stomping up and down, pacing back and forth in front of the booze store. Michael eventually just follows. And they're out there standing there on the curb on 83rd Street, north of 83rd Street, right there on 3rd Avenue in New York City. And it's a real New York scene because here's this little nerd geek of a guy ranting and raving and jumping up and down and yelling and jabbing his finger into the chest of this big lug of a guy, Michael, who's just standing there taking it all. And Stephen eventually begins screaming right there on the street with people coming and going. He says, I want him! He thinks he can get away with this, but he can't! I want him! Well, then he stopped, and he looked at Michael, and he said something. And then Michael said something back. And then Steve charged into the store. He said, Harry, where is that photograph of Gregory and Michael? All right. Months and months ago, at the booze store, in glory days, when we were living in glory days and didn't even know we were living in glory days, I took a camera into the shop, and I took a photograph of Gregory and Michael standing behind the counter. And we took that photograph eventually and thumbtacked it to the wall, on the booze wall behind the counter. And there it stood for months. Now, Gregory and Stephen occasionally get into fights or quarrels. They rant and rave at each other, and they're both a couple of wannabe alphas. So they occasionally get into these weird urinating contests with each other. Well, after one of these fights, Steve was so mad that he came out, yanked the photograph down, tore it up to bits, and threw it away. Yeah. So Steve comes out, he says, Harry, where's that photograph of Gregory and Michael? I said, you tore it up and threw it away. You did. He says, we need a picture of Gregory. Do you still have the negative? I says, what do you mean you need a picture of Gregory? And yes, I suppose I still have the negative. He said, you bring that negative in here tomorrow morning. We need some way of identifying him. And I said, identifying him? A little wiggly in my stomach. I said, oh, whoa. Wait a minute. Tomorrow is Saturday. I am at the Winter Garden Theater all day long. He says, all right, Michael will come by your apartment in the morning and pick up the negative. Just you make sure that you got it and you got it ready. I said, okay. I have to admit, I am a little daunted at the prospect of actually giving this negative to him. Then Steve stops and he looks at me, and Donald, he says, by the way, I don't blame you guys for any of this. This is all on Gregory. All right. So that night when I get home from the Winter Garden Theater selling caps, full-color show programs, T-shirts, sweatshirts, records, cassette books, and buttons, I get home and I look through my stuff, through my photographs and my negatives, and I find it. I find the negative. I put it into I had a fancy airmail envelope, and I put it in there, and I marked the envelope with an X. I said to myself, this is serious. Because if I pass this negative to somebody for the purpose of identifying somebody, and if that somebody in the photograph has something bad happen to them, am I not an accessory? I mean, Gregory, can be a real jerk sometimes, but, we went through a lot together. We're all drinking buddies. I don't want anything bad to happen to the guy. Not really. I am rather daunted, as I said, at the prospect of giving this away. So anyhow, so the next morning, Michael doesn't come by my apartment, idiot, excuse me. He calls and he says he's going to be late. Right. And I say, well, you better not make me late for my job at the Winter Garden. So then he calls me back, a little while later, and he says he's not going to make it at all. I said, well, then now what? He says, well, we'll just meet Monday morning. You bring that negative into the shop Monday morning. There was such a sense of urgency before. We had to have it. We had to have it immediately. It's so or so it seemed. And now it's okay. Bring it in Monday. Fine. Anyhow, next night, Sunday night, I get to see Suzanne. Ah, I haven't seen her in a while. Yes, it's fantastic. We get together at a restaurant called Jose Sent Me, and she's got, a handful of her friends are there too. And one of those friends is a young woman by the name of Beatrice, and she's very funny. I like her. She's got this cute rosy complexion and straight brown hair down to here, down to her chin, down to her collar, and soft brown eyes. And she dresses like a sort of a bohemian tomboy in a skirt. Yes, fantastic. Yes. Anyhow, during the course of the evening's festivities, she made me laugh a few times. She was pretty dry and she had a good sense of humor. Every now and then she'd say something and it would make me laugh. We're drinking and enjoying everybody's each other's company, and eventually I'm crushing on her. So we eventually sort of hit it off. We're looking at each other, and so lo and behold, by the end of the evening, when the party breaks up and everybody goes their separate ways, I find myself walking down the street with Beatrice. Yes, we're walking together, and I would really like to kiss her. I know. So we're walking down the street and we come up to a street corner and we're waiting for the light to change. And I hooked my elbow around the light post, and I swung around and I swung around the light post and I came right up face to face right there with Beatrice. And now we're just standing there face to face and we're sort of looking at each other. And then we sort of slowly start to move in. Both of us are just moving in little by little. And then we're smooching. And we smooch a little bit more. We're standing there on the New York street corner, kissing. So I spent the night at her place. Yes. Now it's Monday. 3 or 4 in the afternoon. Beatrice and I were up all night, so we stayed in bed together until 3 or 4. I didn't go into Vino Veritas at all. I didn't pass that negative to anyone. So Beatrice and I went to the Odessa. We went to the Odessa, this fantastic Ukrainian restaurant, and we had their mushroom barley soup. Magnificent. We hung around a little while, then I had to go to the Winter Garden. So I did. After the Winter Garden, I went back down to Beatrice's place. Yes. Same thing. Monday night into Tuesday, we stayed up all night long. Didn't get out of bed Tuesday until 3 or 4 in the afternoon. Didn't go to work that day either. We went to a Japanese restaurant that afternoon. We went to Sapporo, and I had chicken and eggs, something I had never had. And she says in Japan, that's called relatives in a bowl. Anyhow, I went to the Winter Garden that night, and after that night, went back to Beatrice's place. Right. The next day, however, was Wednesday. No booze store at all anyway. I was at the Winter Garden all day long. Right. Now it's Wednesday night. Then I go back to Beatrice's place, and we wake up Thursday at 2 or 3 in the afternoon. She says, your job at the booze store? I said, yes. She says, I think you've already quit. And I'm like, ugh. I think you're right. I know. So I never gave that envelope marked with an X with a negative in it to anyone. I never opened that envelope. for years. I never opened that envelope for 40 years. And here it is, my fancy airmail envelope. And here is the negative. And I just opened it a couple of weeks ago here in 2025 and took it to a guy who can digitize things. And that's how I got a hold of this photograph again to show to you good people, dear listeners. Yes. So I'll have to tell you what happens next time. Yes. I want to thank you for coming along on this journey with me, and please like, subscribe if you're not subscribed already, please. And please share it out. We've got to spread the word. And make a comment. All right. I look forward to seeing you next time.